Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Miller, and I'm here to discuss some very important things dealing with Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm going to get right into it. Today, our theme is the public image, or I will say the blurred public image of Jehovah's Witnesses versus the private cultural image. The clear representation of certain cultural things that are often overlooked, but all of these things are very important to understanding some nuance regarding Jehovah's Witnesses. The intangible, the incorporeal things that we need to focus on, that explains a lot. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to share some antidotes and some things dealing with elders, a personal experience I had with someone that grew up as a Jehovah's Witness when I was working with her son out here in Texas. And I didn't even know that she used to have dealings with Jehovah's Witnesses because her parents were devout Jehovah's Witnesses. And we're going to take it from there. So I start off by making this statement. Darkness may have power, but it will never have the final word. Let that statement resonate in your mind and in your heart as we develop this theme. Give it a few seconds. When you think about makeup as an example, ladies use makeup. Some men even use makeup, especially if they're an actor or something. But also think about the filters that we have on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Why do people engage with filters? Why don't they show how they really look? Are they embarrassed that they won't be received as well? Are they not aware of their true beauty? Or maybe they could not be as beautiful as they think that they are. But remember, that is still subjective, because is not beauty in the eye of the beholder? I say that to say this. What we present to the public is not often the true representation of what's going on in private. If you value true authenticity, whether you are a current Jehovah's Witness or a former member or someone just tuning in, you have to recognize when honesty is being bestowed before you, and when you're being intellectually and spiritually dishonest. If I'm saying things that you know in your heart of hearts is unique to the culture, but you don't want to acknowledge that publicly, but in your heart, you know, and God sees it too. So that's still a lie. These things are important because just like those Instagram filters, that's just for public display, which means it's fake. I'm going to highlight some things that gives you something to think about. And I like to get you to come to your own conclusions, because statements condemn, but questions convict. I don't need to force what's true upon you. It shouldn't be forced upon you. What's true will be true, whether you accept it or not. So let's talk about some cultural things within Jehovah's Witnesses. As an example, let's highlight the door-to-door ministry. Now, every last Jehovah's Witness understands that the primary focus of the good news is to preach to people and to convert them. Have you not been at the Kingdom Hall and heard if a Bible study isn't making progress after 6 months, you've been encouraged to drop them? I've heard that several times from a few circuit overseers. So don't say that I'm making that up. The whole point of the preaching work is to make a disciple and to deliver the good news. But if a householder were to ask you, hey, are you trying to convert me? Most Jehovah's Witnesses have been trained to respond, no, I'm not trying to convert you. And one may say that genuinely in their heart, but objectively speaking, that's not fully true. So you can convince yourself of something that you're not trying to do, but that can still be the overall motive. As an example, a man that's in his early 20s gets married and he says he's not concerned about intimacy, but then that changes. Or a job, you don't want to get paid for your job. Work the job and don't get paid for it. Now let's see, are you really concerned about not getting paid? Did you really mean you didn't want to be paid? That doesn't mean that you don't enjoy your job. That doesn't mean that this man doesn't love his wife. There are just some practical things that go along with relationships and obligations. Everybody wants to get paid for what they do, especially if they have bills to pay. So to try to make it seem like, oh no, I'm just here because I love people in the job, that is being dishonest. Let that person, let that doctor, one of your favorite doctors, let them not get paid long term. Watch what happens. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just being transparent. And that's what I encourage everyone to do. You are trying to convert the person. Why don't you just tell the person and be honest that you are trying to convert them? Why do you have to give misleading statements? For example, the person were to ask you, the householder, hey, if I don't become a Jehovah's Witness, will you stop coming to my house and checking on me? Now, some individuals may decide to do it regardless, but what is the overall true nature of the culture? Be honest. That person is going to stop coming to them, especially if they're a pioneer, because pioneers still count time. What I mean, maybe the pioneer would come and keep counting time, but what would the elders and the circuit overseers tell them? This person has made it clear they do not want to become a Jehovah's Witness. This person is telling you, I'm going to keep going to my church, but I enjoy studying the Bible. Maybe that person continues to go, but the person will never, ever be converted. And they're asking you, will you continue to study with me for 5, 6, 8, 10 years? What is the true answer? Also, let's say that someone says, will you hang out with me if I'm not a Jehovah's Witness? Will a Jehovah's Witness be honest and say, no, a devout one, I can't do that because you're a bad association? In the articles, anyone, it doesn't matter what you feel, what's written. Now, I'm not saying I agree with Watchtower's interpretation of bad association regarding worldly people. What I'm simply saying is, in the literature, if anyone gets on here and say that this isn't true, I will provide you with a plethora of references of what a worldly person is. A worldly person, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, according to the Watchtower, Bible and Tract Society, is anyone that's not a baptized Jehovah's Witness. Even someone that's an unbaptized publisher is still worldly. I remember finding that out when I was a teenager, when I started attending the Kingdom Hall at 15 years of age. Remember, I was pretty much raised into the organization because all my family were Jehovah's Witnesses, but I studied every single week with a couple from 11 through 15 years of age for 4 years. But then I started attending at 15. And I remember asking to carry the mics. And they were saying, no, you have to be a brother to do that. And I remember they would always call me Isaac when I raised my hand to comment. And then I became an unbaptized publisher. I thought that I was Jehovah's Witness. And one of the elders told me I still wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. So as I'm listening to the comments at the meeting, even as a teenager, I began to realize, based on what they're telling me, they would say stuff like, if you're not a witness, if you're not baptized, then you're worldly. Or I would hear comments about not dating people that's not baptized. Don't mislead them. You don't want to taint their motives. Wait till they come into the organization and then give them time to grow. It was clear that I was a worldly person as a teenager until I got baptized. And that is why the announcement is made. That is why you start calling that person a brother or sister. And some elders may call you a brother or sister during your phase where you are an unbaptized publisher. But I even remember somebody getting counsel after I was baptized for calling someone brother or sister that wasn't baptized. It was this lady, she struggled with smoking, so she could never get baptized because she couldn't stop smoking. And I remember an elder telling another elder, hey, call that person miss because she's not a sister. So to deny what I'm saying will be intellectually and spiritually dishonest. And this is where that makeup needs to come off. This is where those filters that is portrayed to the public, it's not a true representation of what happens in private. Show all of the spiritual nastiness, because you highlight the spiritual nastiness of all other religions. Now, this doesn't have to be nasty because people appreciate realness. As an example, if a householder says, hey, I read in your literature worldly people. What is a worldly person? Do you consider me worldly? I would love to see how Jehovah's Witness responds to that in real time. Yes, you are worldly. That should be the correct answer. Why are we implementing sales techniques? I remember, because I became a personal trainer at 17. And I remember when I started my business at 17 years of age for my personal training, but now I do therapy. But when I started working at Bally Total Fitness at 19 years old, and we would do sales meetings, and we would do these kind of cliffhangers regarding how to sell it to individuals based on their status in life, based on if they're a woman or a man, married or not married. We would garner all this information. And then we didn't give them too much to get them to come back. And I started noticing the same techniques were done at the Theocratic Ministry School. So why are we withholding information? For example, some people ask, do you vote? Some people would answer that directly, and some people will say, I've already voted. But what they mean in their heart, they've already voted for God's kingdom. But the person that's asking you don't understand that that's what you mean. This person is literally referring to, did you vote for a politician? So that's also deceptive. Why can't the person, or why wouldn't that person just answer it directly? No, I don't vote, and this is why. Some people do, and some people don't. I've seen it. Because it's controversial, it's heuristic. And that person walks away thinking that you voted already, but they don't recognize that you mean you voted for God's kingdom. Now, I'm not saying that that's universal, but I've seen that happen. So, when a person will ask you, do you consider me worldly and bad association? I'm your coworker. You do. That's what's in the literature. You can't say, well, I have to get to know people. You are not allowed to have close relationships with someone that's a non-Jehovah's Witness based on the literature. You will get counsel for that. This is where you have this public image that's not a true reflection of what goes on in private, which is dishonest. Also, bad association or worldly people can even be people that's in the organization. If they're not commenting enough, they're not showing up at all of the meetings, they're not going out in field service enough, or reaching out, could be their dress and grooming, all of that. All of that is in the literature. So you have people that you would say that they act like worldly people if they're baptized, but then you have those other ones. So be honest. If you are a householder, if you are, what I mean by a householder, someone that's a non-Jehovah's Witness, that they knock on your door and they try to preach to you, or they catch you at a gas station, or on a boat, harbor witnessing, or at school, whatever. Ask them, hey, do you consider me to be a worldly person? Can we be close friends if I never become a Jehovah's Witness? Will you continue to study with me if I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness? Will you come to my church? Now, the real reason they won't come is because you're a part of false religion. But see if they're going to tell you the truth. I remember being at Pioneer School, and we had a whole segment on this. And the circuit overseer was pretty much saying you can't tell them directly that their religion is false. Why not? Jesus did. Why are we using sales tactics? Basically, what we were encouraged to do was to say, hey, I wouldn't be out here if I didn't think that I had the truth. Wouldn't you agree that if you believe that you had the truth, that you would go out and promote it and stand business on what you believe? So it's kind of skirting around the topic so that the person can take it, so that it'll be more palatable to them. But it also is hiding the underlying question of what the person asks. Do you think that if I am not a Jehovah's Witness, that I'm in false religion? Most people will not answer that directly, but it's in the literature. Tell them straight up, yes, you're a part of false religion, and you're going to get destroyed if you don't become a Jehovah's Witness. Why are you using sales tactics? People's lives on the line. I encourage anyone listening to this to watch any sales meeting, any pyramid sales setup, any sales meeting, and look at the CLM, the Christian Life and Ministry School meeting. It used to be called the Theocratic Ministry School. And also recognize, if you're watching this video 10 years from now, that the organization keeps changing the names of the school. So this is not a lie if 10 years from now they call it something else. It used to be the Theocratic Ministry School, and now it's the CLM. Just like with literature that they print, they keep changing it. They have first, second, and third editions. Look at the first, second, and the third editions. Don't just assume that someone quotes something for a watchtower. Now you go online, it doesn't say that on yours because they keep changing it online. See, I have an Ingram Spark account for some of my books. I can go on there and change something, and then the new print, when somebody purchased the book, that's going to automatically upload and go to the printer. Please don't just assume someone is making something up. They cleverly done this with a lot of stuff. That's why you need the hard copies. And there's always a way to get the original copies. Just don't assume that someone showed you something and because they've changed it online that it's a lie. Go a step further, just like the Bible says, if you keep digging and searching for something like you do with silver, because you have to dig for silver. See, gold is ostensible in most cases. It's already right there. But with silver, you have to dig for it. And that's the whole point. Don't just accept the surface element of it. Dig a little deeper. So think about those cultural aspects, even with the language, the faithful and discreet slave. Tell people what that means. Tell them that that means that we have a channel of truth. When they ask you that, what does that mean? Tell the truth. Don't hide it. Don't try to get them to come to the meetings and have this social circle where people stop caring about the red flags that they see. And they start becoming more emotionally attached, where they're not even concerned about the logic of what they're looking at anymore. You see, what I've come to appreciate about Jehovah's Witnesses is that they have a lot of emotional clarity. And emotional clarity does not mean it's based on truth. See, we need spiritual and intellectual clarity, not emotional and social clarity, meaning this feels good. I know that in my heart, I'm going to see my dead loved one again based on my emotional beliefs. But what does the doctrines actually teach as an example? I know that I have the support of my mom and dad, but only if I remain a Jehovah's Witness, the emotional aspect of it. But never thinking, why don't they support me regardless? On my next episode, I'm going to talk about former members and how just seeing those people cry convicted my heart and how much hurt they're going through. I'm also going to talk about my disassociation regarding how difficult it was for me when thinking about my mom, wife, and family, and a few other things. So just think about those cultural aspects, and also share some former members, share some things that you know in your heart that Jehovah's Witnesses don't fully paint the full picture on certain subjects. Put those in the comments. And also, Jehovah's Witnesses, feel free to share your thoughts. And also, before I get into highlighting the antidotes, I want to take a second to give some firm admonition. There was someone that put something in the comment section, and basically they said that I bash Jehovah's Witnesses. If you watch my videos carefully, I do not bash Jehovah's Witnesses. I focus mainly on doctrines, and I also let you reach your own conclusions. He basically said Jehovah's Witnesses believe in the resurrection, Jesus Christ, and they live a morally clean lifestyle. Why bash them on YouTube? You don't see Jehovah's Witnesses getting on YouTube and bashing others. That statement right there is full of spiritual hypocrisy. You might not see Jehovah's Witnesses get on YouTube, but you will see them at the kingdom halls, at the conventions, during their meetings, when in private, all throughout the literature, inundated throughout the literature. What is Babylon the Great? Bashing Christendom. I was a Jehovah's Witness for 19 years. I know what's in the literature. Videos. So I can go to jw.org and I will find tons of videos saying Christendom, Babylon the Great, worldly people, false religion. Just type in false religion. Watch how many articles you get. Is that not bashing other religions? Any other religion that's not a Jehovah's Witness, no matter if it's Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, does not matter. Hinduism, if you are not a Jehovah's Witness, you are part of Babylon the Great, and it's false, and that's stated throughout all of the literature. See, that is intellectually and spiritually dishonest right there. You are bashing them, just not on YouTube. You're bashing them at your meetings in private. At least it's more commendable for people to talk about this openly, but you do it privately. Again, the person that does it privately has something to hide, not the person that's open about it, that welcomes constructive criticism. So let's highlight a few personal anecdotes. I remember there was someone that lied on me, someone very close, and they went to the elders, and it was not true. And I remember not knowing how to handle that because it's all about what you can prove. So I prayed to God about it, and I was like, how can I defend myself with no proof, and is this person's word against mine? And I was a ministerial servant and a pioneer at the time. And I thought that they were going to step me down. Everything worked out. But what was interesting, they wanted me to apologize to the elders. They said, just apologize to the person. And I said, I refuse to apologize for something I did not do, because it was a serious matter. And I'm saying, by me apologizing for that, leaves a permanent, indelible mark in your minds that I did it. Self-admission, just like a confession. And I said, you can disfellowship me. I will never, ever apologize for something I didn't do, because it was a serious matter. Now, if it was something small, yes. So now to this day, this individual says they didn't say that, or they don't remember it. But what that taught me was this. It reminded me of something when I was a teenager, when I was trying to escape poverty, when my mom was on Section 8 and receiving governmental assistance. I knew no one was coming to my aid. No one was going to come and rescue Isaac Miller. I remember running with my shirt off in the neighborhood at 11 years old when I was trying to play basketball or whatever, which I gave all that up when I became a witness. I gave up my karate, basketball, stuff that I love, because I was a serious Jehovah's Witness when I was a teenager. And throughout my adulthood, I was all in. And someone said, you got to run harder than that, young man. And I knew I didn't care if my mom was a schizophrenic. When I say that, like, you can do better than this, because never underestimate what God has put into someone. Never underestimate, even if they have an intellectual disability like Down syndrome, never underestimate what God's creation can do. So I remember encouraging my mom, we can get off this government system, these government assistants. My stepdad, who didn't have a job at the time, get a job at 11 years old. Now, I'm not taking credit for when they finally decided to get a home. It took them like a decade. But at 11 years old, I was holding them accountable because I believed in them. I don't care about this background. Likewise, with Jehovah's Witnesses and former Jehovah's Witnesses, there's greatness in you. I'm looking past this religious indoctrination, all of that, the humanity. I don't underestimate what God has put into man. The ones that are struggling to move on. It's going to be a tough road, but we can do this and we will do it. Look at Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 and 9. Proverbs chapter 31 in verses 8 and 9. Notice what it says. There are some people that will never have the courage to speak for themselves, but no worry, I got you, and a lot of other people does as well. I am boldly stepping out into the universe with courage. I introduce my truest, authentic self to you. I'm getting stronger by the day because of love. Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 and 9 reads this way. Speak up in behalf of the speechless. I have a moral obligation to speak up for what is right. Defend the rights of all who are perishing. All those people who have died in the past, believing something that's not true. All the people currently that don't realize that they're being misled. Call me what you want. Give me your ad hominems. Give me all those statements. It's no different than during the civil rights movement, when those young men sitting at a dining table where whites only were permitted. And they didn't fight back because they understood that they were viewed as the animal, although they're equal. So if somebody views me as a lion, and then you have this little small cute puppy, if I attack that puppy, even though the puppy may start the fight, because I'm the lion, that's how I'm viewed, they're not going to take my side. But if I'm the lion and you see that puppy keep picking at me, maybe I start to bleed and I'm trying to get away from that puppy. You can't help but recognize that the puppy is at fault, although he appears to be innocent and small. Likewise, during the civil rights movement, if they had fought back, they wouldn't have been able to see who was the enemy. And it's not that they shouldn't have fought back at some point, but the issue was you had to cut through that mental indoctrination of seeing the African American as an animal, as lesser than. So when you see them beating these innocent people, blood coming from their heads, sicking dogs on them, spraying them with hoses, anybody with any type of heart, once that made public news and was all over the world, the people that claimed to be Christian had to surrender and say, this is not right. So may former members learn something from this. I'm not saying being docile, but recognize the most important thing is not the doctrines yet. It's not even the Bible itself. It is important, but they don't see you as human. They see you as somebody that's the enemy. So the main goal is to get them to see you as a human being. How do you do that? And then when you use God's word, and then when you show them kindness, now it can resonate. See, you are being deemed as the lion right now. Facts don't matter at that point. until they are convicted in their heart. So you have to keep loving them. They don't know any better. Don't fit the image that's being programmed already. There's a lot of things I can't share because it'll mess it up. But please, the ones that need to hear this message, show love, show faith, believe in them when they don't believe in themselves. You be Christ-like when they're not being. 1 Peter 2:21, Jesus left us a model to follow his steps closely. Follow them. Do what Jesus did because they're worth it. Winning someone over, getting them to wake up, is worth it. Even when you have to suffer. We're already suffering, but suffer for righteousness' sake. I remember working with a client with Down syndrome, and his family never believed in him, that he could make his bed. It took him a year. He could barely figure out how to put the pillow in the pillowcase because he can't do it, Isaac. Why you keep trying? That's something I've known since I was a little boy. Do not underestimate the power of what God can do and what's in somebody. When he looked at me, he said, I can't. He could barely speak. I started crying because I knew the real reason that he had never learned to make his bed because people didn't have the patience to teach him and to learn his learning style and to realize although he has an IQ below 25, that is still a form of intelligence. And because of that, God can still come into the picture. And when you believe in someone, they look into your eyes. That's why I love that quote by Johann Girdle so much. Look at a man the way that he is, and you will only make him worse. But look at a man the way that he can be, and he'll become the way that he should be. When you look at someone, when you say, hey, you're calling me the N word. Hey, you're calling me the A word, apostate, all of that, and you show them love, no matter what you do, that's going to cut deep. And then when you couple that with God's word and live in a good lifestyle, your personal testimony is powerful. The enemy doesn't want you to understand this. He wants you to fight back. He wants you to create distractions. He wants you to get in the comment section and go back and forth with people. All of that. See, to help people, we have to get ahead of all of that. The linguistic programming, what has happened to people. Do that, and you can. So when I think about another personal anecdote with an elder that was giving me marital counsel, and I remember he pretty much said, whenever something is going wrong in your home, it's always the man's fault. He said a man may be the head, but most women think they're the neck. Sounds very misogynistic. I'm going to do another episode on that. That was another thing I hated, the misogyny. I used to always feel sorry for all those good sisters that were never going to get married, just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and then they just died. Now I have kids, 50, 60, 70 years old. Never seemed fair to me that it wasn't enough men for them. But men, it was like going to Disneyland. Here's my issue with that statement. Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3. And I used to always tell the elders, you're not looking at this holistically. Let's look at the Bible, Old and New Testament collectively, and let's make this pragmatic. Because when you give counsel that somebody interprets that that's coming from God because they think that God has appointed you, if it doesn't work and it makes things worse, whose fault is that? And I'm saying, what you're saying is going to make things worse. And let me show you. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3 says this. But I want you to know that the head of every man is the Christ. In turn, the head of a woman is the man. In turn, the head of Christ is God. Yes, the Bible says man is the head. But here's the thing. We all have an individual accounting to God. What I told him, you're training the woman to think with that statement alone, if she's ever has problems in her marriage or with a man, it is always the man's fault. That's going to create problems, reap what you sow. Let's take that and apply it to Jehovah then. Every time they needed new light, every time the organization failed, every time somebody was disfellowship, is not Jehovah the head of his organization? Is not Jesus the second head of the organization? So it says that God is the head. So if that's the case, then every time something goes wrong with the organization, then we can say that it's God's fault. And he had nothing to say about that. What I'm simply highlighting is that sounds good on paper, but let's apply it practically. Let's blame the elders every time somebody fails. Let's blame the group overseer for his group every time somebody fails in their group. You're not going to do that. You're going to say that person had a choice, that individual. It's imperfection. But don't put all that pressure on that man. He can do everything right and the woman still doesn't listen to him. A woman can do everything right and a man still doesn't listen. Jehovah God did everything right and people still didn't listen to him. So is that his fault? Did he do something wrong? Jesus preached the good news, healed the sick, raised the dead, did everything. Even at John chapter 5 and verse 39, he said, you keep searching through the scriptures to seek everlasting life, thinking you're going to get everlasting life. He said, but these very scriptures talk about me. He said, you believe in Moses. That's who they were believing in. He said, if you believed in Moses, you would believe in me. Why? Because he wrote about me. John chapter 5. Matter of fact, research the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, that Moses wrote. Some people say he didn't, but Jesus made a powerful point. He said, he wrote about me. Go see who Moses wrote about. It'll give you a deeper understanding into the full essence of Jesus Christ too. He said it. He wrote about me. So likewise, search the scriptures all day, but unless you come to the one that can give you life, it won't make a difference. Jesus Christ never made a mistake. Should we blame him for all the sin and death that's around? So likewise, know when you're putting too much on a man with those statements. So now you got that man thinking he perhaps married the wrong person. Or the woman needs to be told that she's wrong, or vice versa. But when you train somebody to think, well, it's never her fault, it's something you're doing wrong, that in itself creates problems. I remember when the person I'm telling you about regarding a non-witness, when I tried to invite his mother to the meetings. And I sent this lady a Watchtower article and she said, don't ever send that to me again. And she's in her 50s. And I was like, ooh, I felt persecuted. But after talking to her, she had a very bad upbringing with her mom and dad. Her dad was a tyrant, go to meetings, Watchtower, pretty much forcing it on the person and putting on a public image. He was one way at the Kingdom Hall, but was different privately. He was mean, he fussed and yelled a lot, but he put on a perfect image at the Kingdom Hall. No autonomy there. So she was damaged from all those experiences. She saw how it broke up her family. Now, I'm not saying it applies to all people all over the world, but that was her experience. I remember when I shared with another sister when I wrote my first book, and I told her how the elders were trying to get me not to engage in my book writing in YouTube. And she was pretty much saying you should have listened to the elders, because if they said that it came from God. No elder can tell me not to write a book. You see how heavily indoctrinated this person is? She's beginning to let man interpret things for her, and they're going beyond what's written. That's not in the Bible. There's nothing wrong with writing a book. And there's so many people that think like that. Put the same private image on in public. Take off the makeup. Show everything. Don't use any filters. Be transparent with people so that they'll know exactly what they're getting into. And that's what I encourage you to do. Now, on my next episode, I'm going to highlight former members and how that just hit my heart to speak up and say something about it. And some positive words for former members and for current members to see them differently. And also I'm going to highlight some things with my disassociation, and how hard that was for me, especially when considering my mom for various reasons. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. But remember this phrase, and remember to please like, subscribe, and share my content and comment. Share your thoughts in the comment section and subscribe to my channel. I thank everyone that has subscribed so far. Thank you so much. Remember this phrase, darkness may have power, but it will never have the final word. Thank you.